for having us here today. And before I go, I'd just like to say, I'm the father of 4 children, so I also 4 boys actually. So I'm very tired, and anytime I get a chance to get in front of teachers and school administrators, I always have to say, thank you. In terms of anyone who has to watch my kids, thank you. And I know that there are a lot of parents that feel the same way. Now in terms of that question of how many people have heard of the coronavirus, now of course now that's something that's on all of our minds. However, curiously, how many people, in terms of the information that we're getting, how many people are watching the news in terms of getting the latest and up to date? How about the internet? People looking at the internet? Yeah. And so what I would say is this, is that's very important. First and foremost, we want to be educated on this particular virus. There's a lot of things that are coming out. The one thing I will warn you against is that there's a lot of information and people have reasons for putting out information. Some of that information is going to be useful for us, some is not. So we want to make sure that the source of the information that we're having is a reliable source. Things like the CDC and so forth, certain governmental agencies are things that we want to really pay attention to. There are certain things that are going to, the purpose of the outlet of certain information is really to sometimes create a stir, try to instill fear in us. Now, should we be scared of the coronavirus? The truthful answer to that is yes and no. Right? The coronavirus is what we have, COVID-19. COVID-19-SARS-2 is what we're dealing with. So SARS, as you recall, is a severe acute respiratory syndrome. Now we have to have that designation of SARS to COVID-19 because a coronavirus is a family or a class of viruses that are typically characterized by very mild symptoms. So if we have a coronavirus infection, generally speaking, we're going to look like we have a cold or we have a flu, and that's going to be something that we have dealt with. Are there deaths to influenza? Yes, there are actually quite a few, right? A little bit less than 1% of people who have the influenza virus per year do pass from that, from complications of that. And we're looking at, from a coronavirus, we're looking at something like maybe 4%. So if you look at that, 4% compared to the 96% of people who don't pass is not great. But compared to the 0.8, 0.6, 0.4% that pass from the influenza, we are looking at a percentage greater that are passing from this. Now, when we look at something like a coronavirus, we've all talked about, and I know that all teachers are well aware of the ideas of prevention, cleaning our hands, especially with the incubators of disease that we deal with on a daily basis. Now, that being said, you're going to hear things like children are less susceptible to the coronavirus. What I would say is this, is that in my opinion, this is only my opinion, is that it's not that children are less susceptible, it's that children are not being hospitalized at the extent as adults are. So that's one thing that we can say. Well, thank God our children are not being infected to that extent, but it does not mean that children are not being infected by coronavirus. Remember that percentages that you're going to see, this country, this county, that county, remember that is based on testing. Remember that 2, 3, 6 months ago, nobody had coronavirus, right? That's not true. Those people were not tested. Those people were walking around with coronavirus. Likely it just resolved, and like 80, 90% of the cases do anyway. So that's the thing, that a lot of the statistics that you're going to have now are based on who's being tested, the availability of those tests to people, and those statistics that are being gathered. So just understand that when we start to look at statistics and make sure that we have that in context. Now, in terms of prevention, of course, is the best way to not get a disease. Don't be there, right? That's the thing. However, we know that it is contracted by, through spit droplets, or if we cough or spit and those things are in the air. If we touch things, one of the biggest problems with corona is that it can last much longer. I believe it's like 9 days versus like hours of regular influenza. So if we touch something and it is infected, that can last. Doesn't mean that it will last, but it can last for several days. So that if we later on go ahead and lean on the same wall or touch the same surface that has not been cleaned, then we are susceptible to that illness. Now, the problem with these kind of epidemics or these pandemics, as opposed to influenza, what's the difference? Because they sort of act the same way, right? In fact, when people pass, they pass very similarly from influenza and the pandemic. We have complications, things like pneumonia. People will develop pneumonia, and then that leads to organ failure, which of course is responsible for most of the deaths of this type. The issue is the kind of virulence. The virulence in a pandemic is one in which, if you strengthen yourself, we typically say during flu season, what do? We vitamin C ourselves, vitamin D ourselves, we get in good shape, we try to sleep well, we eat well, all these things so that our immune system can be in the best shape to react to any kind of disease. The issue with this kind of pandemic is that regardless of what your immune system is. This doesn't mean, oh, okay, I'm just going to eat pizza and do nothing. But obviously, the healthier we are, the more we are not going to be weakened by everything else that is out there. But the thing about these pandemics is that if we are exposed to it, likely we will contract it. That is why these pandemics are considered pandemics. It's so scary because I can do everything right, and if I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time, I may still become ill, right? And that's the scary part. Now, we're going to counter that scary part with the statistic that 80 to 90%, I apologize, I don't have the exact statistic, but 80 to 90% of the cases of coronavirus are going to just be mild. And you're just going to have a cold-like, flu-like symptoms, and you will resolve, and you will be fine, right? The immune-compromised, the senior citizen population, our children are the people who are particularly vulnerable. Why? Children, because their immune systems are not fully developed yet, right? Because their organs aren't fully developed and matured. Therefore, again, pneumonia becomes a lot more complicated in children. Our senior citizen population, because their immunity is compromised, and also because, again, a lot more wear and tear on the body, their ability to sustain severe illness is not as good as healthy adults. So we are, and then immune compromised for the same reason. So again, we want to look at those populations as the people that we need to make sure that we protect. And to do that, we have to make sure that we protect ourselves, right? As teachers, as stewards to our children, as well as ourselves, we have to make sure that we stay as healthy and as strong as possible so that we can protect those that can't protect themselves, right? And so what can we do? Again, a lot of it is going to be behaving in a way that some might feel uncomfortable, going the extra mile to behave in a way that is going to prevent the spreading of these kinds of diseases. We are social beings. We want to express, hey, how you doing? You know, high five, you know, hugs, and especially with kids. You know, you teachers, that we, you know, I'm talking to the crowd here, but teachers is a thankless job. We do it, why? Because we love what we do. We love the children we work with, right? Everybody in here, no? Oh, I'm sorry. But how about most of the time, we love the children that we work with.
HR is right there, I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, right, so because of that, right, exactly. So because of that, you know, we want to model for them how to be and how to show themselves, and so we do that. Now is a time more to try to find other ways, and so I would just say that, you know, that's something that I want to keep in your mind is to how can you modify the things that you do and the choices that you make. You know, is it absolutely necessary at this time? You know, that's the thing. Am I going into a public, you know, forum where there's a lot of people? Is it absolutely necessary? It's not comfortable, it's not the way we want to do it, but that's sort of what we're going to have to do for a while. And so, you know, I would encourage you to keep yourself educated, and then, and again, just really do whatever you can to make sure that you keep yourselves and your families and your kids and your students healthy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.